Shouldn't that give Nesta some hope?
You're right. Maybe deep down Nesta's afraid to hope. What if she lets herself believe in happiness only to have it taken away again? She lost her father, her human life. Now she's terrified of losing more.
That's a really good point. And wouldn't you be angry too if you were forced into a world you never wanted? A world where you suddenly have all these powers you don't understand?
Absolutely.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Witter, your shortcut to being in the know about books, even if your TBR pile is like threatening to topple over. And trust me, I get it. 5-book fantasy series can be super daunting. So today we're diving into something a little different. A novella, actually. We're checking out A Court of Frost and Starlight, Book 4 in Sarah J. Maas's crazy popular A Court of Thorns and Roses series.
What's really interesting here is that even though it's shorter than the other books, it still manages to pack a punch. It's like a bridge between that massive war from the last book and the huge finale that's still to come.
And it all goes down during Solstice in Valaris, that magical city that's become a haven for all our main characters. For anyone just jumping in now, imagine a city where magic isn't just some cool trick. It's literally built into the architecture.
Yeah.
That's Valaris, and honestly, it's as much a character as anyone else.
Totally. And we get to rejoin our favorite crew. Feyre and Rhysand, obviously, but also Cassie, Nesta, Elaine, Lucian, and Amren. You're coming right off the brutal Hybern War, so they're all carrying around some serious baggage.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We've got this really festive backdrop of solstice celebrations, but underneath it, all these characters are still messed up from the war, right?
Exactly. The city itself is rebuilding, and Feyre's right there in the middle of it all. Volunteering, helping people find homes, gathering supplies for winter. She's all about action, but internally, she's really struggling.
It's almost like she can't believe things are good after everything she's been through.
Exactly. She keeps waiting for the other shoe to drop, almost afraid of her own happiness, like it's some kind of cosmic trick. And given her past, it makes sense.
Totally. And Cassian, he's always the one with the insights, right? He picks up on how the war has really messed with the Illyrian warriors, all that unrest simmering under the surface. I feel like that's going to be a big deal later on.
Oh, absolutely. Maas is definitely setting us up for some serious conflict. And then there's Nesta.
Oh, Nesta.
Yeah.
She is spiraling.
Wrecker.
Isolating herself, lashing out. She's like this caged bird, powerful wings, but refusing to fly. Makes you wonder why.
Well, she's dealing with a ton. Survivor's guilt, resentment towards this whole Fey world, and this deep anger that she doesn't even seem to get herself.
It's interesting. You say she's rejecting this world, but her powers are actually growing. Seems a little contradictory, doesn't it?
That's a great point. It's almost like this Fey world is awakening something in her, whether she wants it to or not. And her anger, it feels almost prophetic, like she's sensing a threat that the others aren't.
Oh, good catch. Now, Elaine, the other sister, is handling everything in a totally different way. She's withdrawn almost in this state of suspended animation.
Elaine's clinging to what's left of her human life, finding comfort in gardening and routines. She's mourning the life she lost and struggling to connect with Lucian, her potential mate.
Which is so interesting because Lucian is so into her, it makes you wonder if she'll ever let go of the past enough to be with him.
It's a tricky situation for sure, and it really shows how differently people deal with trauma, And, speaking of dealing with trauma, this book really gets into art as a way to heal.
So we were talking about how Feyre is leading all these rebuilding efforts for the city, but it also feels like she's doing some major rebuilding inside herself through her art, too.
Right, exactly. There's this one scene where she finds a tapestry that's woven with all these threads of darkness and hope, and it really gets to her.
Oh, I remember that. The weaver who made it, she lost her whole family in the war. And creating that tapestry was like her way of working through all that grief. Really powerful stuff.
It is. And it makes you think about how art can help us find meaning and beauty, even when things are really bad. Feyre even has this dream of opening a studio, a place where people, especially kids who have gone through trauma, can heal through art.
That's beautiful. I
Wow.
can totally see it. This haven full of color and the sounds of people creating. It reminds me of how I doodle in my notes during meetings, like a little rebellion against boredom.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. I love that. It's those little ways we express ourselves that can make a difference. And it's not just Feyre. Elaine finds peace in gardening. Lucien in quietly supporting Elaine. And even Cassian with how dedicated he is to training new warriors. They're all finding their own little sparks of light in the darkness.
It's like everyone is trying to figure out how to move on after the war, to find some sense of purpose and peace. And even the solstice celebrations play a part in that, don't they?
For sure. The solstice is all about looking back at the past, honoring what's been lost, but also looking ahead to the future with hope.
It's that reminder that even after the longest night, the sun will rise again. Speaking of light and darkness, let's go back to Nesta for a second. There's this scene where she really lets her guard down, and it's heartbreaking.
Are you talking about when she goes off on Feyre in that rundown tavern?
Yes, she accuses Feyre of trying to bribe her to come to the solstice celebrations, and then she says, "You have your lives and I have mine." Talk about a gut punch.
That line really shows how isolated and resentful she feels, like she's put up these walls around herself and won't let anyone in, especially not Feyre.
I get what you're saying about Nesta rejecting this new world, but isn't Rhysand proof that good things can happen in the Fey realm? He's so devoted to Feyre, their love is strong, and he's a good leader. Shouldn't that give Nesta some hope?
You know, you're right. Maybe deep down Nesta's afraid to hope. What if she lets herself believe in happiness only to have it taken away again? She lost her father, her human life. Now she's terrified of losing more.
That's a really good point. And wouldn't you be angry too if you were forced into a world you never wanted? A world where you suddenly have all these powers you don't understand?
Absolutely. Nesta's anger is coming from a much deeper pain, a pain she hasn't even started to deal with.
Okay, so we've got Feyre finding comfort in art, Nesta battling her demons, Elaine holding on to the past. What about the guys? How are they coping?
Well, Rhysand, as always, is trying to be the steady one for everyone, especially for Feyre. But even he has his moments of weakness.
Like when he's stressing over what to get Feyre for Solstice. It's hilarious and sweet at the same time. He's this ancient, powerful High Lord, and he's turning into a puddle over jewelry.
It's because he cares so much. He wants to get her something that means something, something that shows their special bond.
It reminds me of, well, let's just say, I get Rhysand's gift-giving struggles. Sometimes the simplest things are the hardest.
Totally. And then there's Cassian and that whole Illyrian Birchen tradition. It's not what you'd expect from these fierce warriors.
Right. Picture this. You've got these battle-hardened Illyrians stripping down and sweating it out together in this cedar-lined shed. Not exactly what came to mind when I thought warrior bonding time.
It's like a super macho spa day.
Right.
But it also shows their need for connection and being vulnerable. These guys have been through hell together. And the Birchen is their way to reconnect, to heal, to just be themselves, without the weight of war on their shoulders.
It's a reminder that even the toughest people need a place to let go, to be vulnerable, to find comfort in shared experiences. And that's something we can all relate to, right?
Yeah, totally. We all need those moments where we can just be ourselves, warts and all. And it's interesting how A Court of Frost and Starlight shows us that even in a world with magic and all these creatures, the things that connect us are really human.
So true. Like that scene with Rhysand trying to pick out a solstice gift for Feyre. He's this ancient, powerful High Lord, but he gets all flustered about finding the perfect gift for his mate.
I know, I was literally yelling at my audio, but just get her the jewels, Rhys. She loves sparkly things. But then again, haven't we all been there trying to find a gift that shows how much we care about someone?
Totally. And it's those relatable struggles that make Rhysand so lovable. He's not just some distant, all-powerful being. He's a guy who's crazy in love and wants to make his partner happy. It's so cool to see that vulnerability in a male character, especially a leader. And speaking of vulnerability, Feyre takes a huge leap in this book by sharing her art. Remember how nervous she was to show everyone her paintings?
Oh, she was terrified, but she pushed through that fear. And it shows how much she's grown. She's gone from just surviving to being a leader who wants to use her position to help others heal. Her idea to open a studio, especially for kids who've been through so much because of the war, it's really inspiring.
It is. It's about more than just making pretty pictures. It's about giving people a safe place to express themselves, to deal with their emotions, to find some peace and purpose. And that brings us back to that whole idea of finding hope even when things are dark.
Exactly. Even with all the pain and trauma, there's still beauty to be found, connections to be made, and healing to happen.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into A Court of Frost and Starlight. We want to leave you with something to think about. If you could create a place for healing, a sanctuary, where people could find comfort and express themselves freely, what would it look like? What kind of art would be there? What traditions would you make?
That's a powerful question and one worth thinking about. Because sometimes all it takes is a little bit of creation, a moment of connection, a spark of hope, to remind us that even in the darkest times, we're not alone.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that thought. Until next time, happy reading.